If you're a listener of Israel Policy Pod, you already know that the hardest questions about Israel and Jewish life don't come with simple answers. That's why I want to recommend a podcast I think you'll like. It's called Identity Crisis from the Shalom Hartman Institute. Each week, Hartman president and host Yehuda Kurtzer brings moral rigor and genuine curiosity to conversations with guests like authors Sarah Horowitz and Dara Horn, Israeli political leaders like Yair Golan and Yossi Beilin, and Israel Policy Forum's own Chief Policy Officer Michael Koplow to wrestle seriously with the issues shaping this moment in Jewish life. What makes the Identity Crisis podcast stand out is that it doesn't rush to easy answers. Instead, it creates space for disagreement, complexity, and real moral debate about Israel, about power, responsibility, and the future of the Jewish people. If you're looking for a podcast featuring great conversations about the essential issues facing Jewish life, I highly recommend checking out Identity Crisis with Yehuda Kurtzer in the show notes or wherever you get your podcasts. Shalom and welcome to the Israel Policy Pod. I'm Neri Zilber, a journalist based in Tel Aviv and a policy advisor to Israel Policy Forum. Benjamin Netanyahu was back in Washington this week for another summit meeting with President Donald Trump. So I thought it would be a great opportunity to convene my own summit meeting this episode with Israel Policy Forum's very own Chief Policy Officer, Michael Koplow, and our dear friend and former colleague, Shira Efron, a senior fellow at the RAND Corporation and their distinguished Israel Policy Chair. We discussed the latest Bibi-Trump meeting, the chances of a deal or war with Iran, next steps in Gaza, the growing Israeli hold on the West Bank, and much, much more. This was, as always, a terrific conversation with them both. And just a reminder, by way of housekeeping, we're now a video podcast, so do check us out on YouTube, and please subscribe and rate us. That always helps. With that, let's get to Michael and Shira. Hi, Michael. Hi, Shira. Welcome back to the podcast.
Hi, guys.
Hi, Neri. Hi, Michael. Good to see you.
It's always good to see both of you. I should have said Happy New Year, since we haven't chatted, at least publicly and on the record, since December for our end-of-year awards show. So this is long overdue, but I think a good time to be talking, and there's a lot to discuss. By the way, we're recording this late Wednesday night Tel Aviv time. Bibi Netanyahu and Donald Trump just met at the White House. It was their 7th meeting overall since Trump's re-inauguration. Is that a fair term for it? Last January. So Bibi's 6th trip to the U.S., both, I think, unprecedented numbers, historic numbers, beautiful numbers. If you are Bibi Netanyahu, I think by far not only the most that a foreign leader has seen Trump, but maybe by far any foreign leader has seen an American president in his first year in office. But obviously the major focus tonight and, well, in the current moment is Iran. So, Michael, I wanted to get into it, and let's start with you. This latest Bibi-Trump meeting just ended after 3 hours. Fair to say it was an odd one. No photo ops, right? No public remarks of any kind, which is fairly unheard of for Donald Trump. Only a post by the president on Truth Social just now, hot off the presses. The basic gist of it being there was nothing definitive reached between the two leaders. Trump's preference is for negotiations and a deal. The Iranians need to be, and I quote, more reasonable and responsible than last year, or else they'll likely be hit again. For his part, Bibi Netanyahu put out a very laconic statement saying he, quote, affirmed Israel's security needs in the context of the negotiations and will continue to coordinate closely with the U.S. All right, Michael, your initial thoughts, again, hot off the presses. It just ended.
My initial thoughts are that it may be a good thing for Netanyahu that there were no press around and no press conference afterward and no Trump off the cuff. In these previous meetings, he's been blindsided a bunch of times by that. He was blindsided by the announcement of Iran negotiations the first time. He was blindsided by various things related to Gaza. So considering that I doubt that this meeting was as harmonious as the previous ones, because they seem to have a difference of opinion on Iran. They seem to have a difference of opinion on Gaza and progress in Gaza. One of the other things that Trump said in his post-meeting Truth Social post is, we discussed the tremendous progress being made in Gaza. There is truly peace. Peace, of course, is in all caps, in the Middle East. I doubt that's how Netanyahu would describe those things. He certainly doesn't seem to think that there is tremendous progress in Gaza. And I also don't think he seems to view what's going on as peace in the Middle East. So, the sense before this meeting is that Bibi came here and he's looking to get Trump on his page on Iran, or at least convince Trump of things that Israel wants to see in a deal, or convince Trump that Iran's doings are more nefarious than Trump sometimes talks about. So, these two guys don't seem to ever be acrimonious. So
Nope.
I doubt there was open fighting, but I guess hard to judge at the moment, given that we didn't see anything in public, and Trump issued a typical Trumpian statement, and Netanyahu basically said nothing. So we'll see in the days and weeks ahead, and I think we'll judge really more by Iran and what happens there as to how this meeting went. I'm also curious if Netanyahu is now going to confirm that he'll be returning next week, not only for the AIPAC conference, but for the Board of Peace meeting, because my guess is that Trump would like him there. But we'll find
I
out.
don't believe he's going to go back to the Board of Peace meeting because there are various, shall we say, other world leaders that are going to be sharing that stage.
Yeah, I get it. He doesn't want to be next to the Qataris or the Turks. On the other hand, if in this meeting Trump said to him, "I want you there," and it also came out today before the meeting that Netanyahu officially signed the documents for the Board of Peace, which is also I don't recall a cabinet vote or a Knesset vote. So this is wonderful. Netanyahu just signed Israel up for this thing.
No debate.
Yeah, no debate. That's how democracies are supposed to work, right? So I don't know. Who knows? My guess is that Netanyahu wouldn't have necessarily wanted that out in public either, especially because he didn't sign it today. I think the date on it was January 19th or January 20th, and it's only now coming out that he did this. So who knows? If Trump wants him there next week, he's going to be there next week. That I'm pretty certain of.
Wow, eagle-eyed Michael Koplow. I did not see the post date on the Board of Peace letter of participation by Bibi Netanyahu. Again, we'll get into Gaza in just a moment. I wanted to keep our focus on Iran. And yes, this Bibi trip to DC was billed, at least in Israel, as an urgent visit, a fateful visit, a decisive visit on the Iran issue. Like you said, remains to be seen what actually comes out of it. But that's at least the impression that was given on this end. Shira, your initial thoughts to this now 7th meeting between the two leaders?
I mean, I agree with Michael. Very difficult, relatively cryptic statements. The one from Trump being more positive, and Bibi just saying he's, maintaining the interest of the state of Israel. It was scheduled to be a 1-hour meeting. It ended up being longer than 3 hours, I think.
Yeah, about 3 hours.
Not sure if it's good or bad. Hard to see. I think many of us thought that Netanyahu would go to Washington and hear some tough things from Trump, and then it turns out that actually Netanyahu went into the room and completely changed Trump's mind. So really, who knows? And I think we'll be way smarter. I don't know if the days and weeks ahead, probably even tomorrow or by the weekend, on what was actually in that meeting. Thing is that it's very clearly from Netanyahu's perspective, the priority was Iran, right? My understanding, at least from the way it's framed here, is that actually it was difficult. There's an extraordinary military coordination, right, with Israel being in CENTCOM. Israel knows every airplane, every maritime vessel that sails around here. On the whole diplomatic front, there is less visibility to Israel despite coordination. So Witkoff was here, I think, a week ago. And, there was a meeting there before the negotiations with Iran actually began. But since then, I mean, of course, you can do these things over the phone and secure VC, but Netanyahu with Trump has proven again and again that there's no substitute for FaceTime, right? So that was
Actual
the goal
FaceTime.
of the meeting, clearly. Yeah, and I don't. It's not. I mean, Trump said it, and again, I could be eating a hat in a couple of hours. Who knows what's going to happen? But it's very clear that Trump is prioritizing a deal over a strike in Iran. I don't think Netanyahu supports any deal. At this point, he doesn't believe that Iran would be flexible on the ballistic missiles and proxies and what have you, right? Netanyahu really wants, and I understand why, but not supporting a deal and also not giving this regime a lifeline, which a deal will, right? A deal would give this regime a lifeline, maybe a short one. But a lifeline. So there's clearly divergence of wills there. What happens? How does Iran play? And we are seeing that this armada of the U.S. posture in the Middle East is only increasing. The second aircraft carrier Bush is on the way to the region now again. So there's very clearly like a credible military threat. We know how it ended last time. I'm not sure how it's going to end today. On Gaza, on the Board of Peace, I mean, of course, there's no what is decided here at a vote and a cabinet. I mean, we're long past this standard best practices, decision making processes. Okay, that's not the issue. The question with the Board of Peace is, I think it's mutual. I think Netanyahu doesn't want to be there on the stage with some of these leaders, but I'm pretty sure they don't want him there either. Right, like for all these Arab leaders to be there with Netanyahu on stage, it's not good for them, and especially not with the images that we're seeing from the West Bank and the West Bank decision that was happening now, and Ramadan. It's going to be around Ramadan, and who knows what provocation could be on Temple Mount, right? With Ben Gvir. I mean, I think Trump wants Netanyahu in, but if Arab leaders tell him, we come, but it's complicated for us, I'm not as convinced that Netanyahu is under extreme pressure to come back for that photo op. And AIPAC is a different story because I think, according to my understanding, he's still scheduled to come for AIPAC, but that may have changed. It's all short trip because his wife and son are now in Israel.
Yeah. I mean, look, the Board of Peace issue, it just is a tangent, but can you imagine another Israeli leader signing up for this international body that has as its goal, according to the UN resolution, Security Council resolution that set it up, a future Palestinian state, and how Bibi Netanyahu and the Israeli right would have reacted to, say, a Prime Minister Yair Lapid or a Prime Minister Bennett signing up to this initiative? I'll pause at that for our listeners. You don't have to, you have to know much about Israeli politics to know that the Israeli right would be marching in the streets as we speak tonight. But I'll just say, in terms of initial reactions to what just happened at the White House, I'm not that surprised by Trump's Truth Social statement. I think we all knew, and he said it publicly for weeks now, his preference is for a diplomatic solution. He wants a deal with Iran. The question is, what kind of deal? He says they have to be reasonable. I think his definition of reasonable is probably very different than the leaders in Tehran, which we'll get into in just a second. And he also threatened them once again. And it's a very clear threat that he's made now for a month and a half almost. A real military threat against Iran once again. So in terms of the substance of the statement, not that surprising, despite the fact that Bibi was there to perhaps change his mind. It may have been a bit surprising that he didn't go into details as to what he wanted to see from the Iranians, like he has even last night on a Fox News interview where he said he wants the nuclear program included in the deal. He wants ballistic missiles in the deal. And then what did he say? No.
He also said that he also said that Netanyahu is in favor of a good deal.
Yeah, so. And by the way, we can maybe get into speculate as to what Israel's real position is, but Netanyahu publicly has said, okay, I have these conditions for a deal, which are obviously maximalist conditions. If Iran somehow were to meet those demands, I think Bibi would accept that deal, right? Limits on the ballistic missiles, limits on support for the various terror groups and proxies around the region, no enrichment inside Iran, moving out the highly enriched uranium. I mean, those were the positions that Netanyahu put out last week. So it was just interesting to me that there were no details.
But don't you think sorry, I didn't mean to, but I think in principle, like you're right, but I feel like the maximalist approach here on Iran became more maximalist. Like I think Netanyahu wants more in Iran. I think he wants regime change.
And there's no question to me that Netanyahu's maximalist position is different from what Trump views as his own maximalist position.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know what Trump's actual position is. It remains to be seen in the negotiations. But Shira, to your point, right? There's one option where they call it the kind of skinny deal with Iran, which is just the nuclear file, which Israel is adamantly against, and I think that's the reason why Netanyahu flew to Washington. Right? Option one. Option two is, nuclear missiles, maybe proxies, which is the more kind of maximalist deal that maybe would be acceptable to Israel, but maybe perhaps Trump's actual position, like he said last night in an interview and in other moments. Also, Steve Witkoff said it publicly a few weeks ago. The third option, which you hear more and more, at least in Israel, is the Iranian regime, the Islamic Republic, is so weak at this moment. This is a historic opportunity to actually topple it. And that any deal, no matter the conditions, that would actually give it some sanctions relief and economic lifeline would be squandering that historic opportunity. And this is now the time to, press the advantage. And that whether militarily or perhaps by not doing a deal and just waiting the Iranians out, you need to go for regime change, for toppling the regime. I think that's something you hear more and more in Israel, right, Shira?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Correct.
I don't think regime change is in the cards for the U.S. for what it's worth. I mean, Trump, of course, told the protesters now weeks ago that help is coming, and it still may be, but it certainly wasn't coming at the time. And then you've got J.D. Vance, who generally is a reliable guide and interpreter to what Trump is up to and what's going to happen. And J.D. Vance, I think it was just yesterday, said explicitly that the U.S. is interested in a deal that will address the nuclear issue, but that if Iranians want regime change, they should do it themselves. But that's not the job for the United States.
And it's not surprising that J.D. Vance, out of all the senior Trump people, said that. He's, say, the more isolationist wing of the Trump administration. But again, that's a shift from what Trump was saying in the beginning of January, when he was explicitly threatening the regime. Again, I said this last week with our colleague Shani. If you want to get into Trump's head, good luck, but it can change. It can change. It
can change, but I also think that he's now been in office for the second time for over a year, and he's used force a bunch of times. And leave aside what he says, like if we just look at what he's done, whether it was Operation Midnight Hammer or the Venezuela operation, he's clearly not reticent about using force, but he also seems to want to use it quickly and make a big show and get out. So assuming that if we can predict based on the past, if that's his preference, then we'll see strikes on Iran. And by the way, I do think that there's going to be some sort of U.S. strike on Iran at some point in the next few months. But is it going to be a long, drawn-out thing that doesn't stop until the regime is gone? That would surprise me.
So we can get into the scenarios of what a military action would look like. I want to actually focus on the diplomacy, because that's obviously Trump's initial preference. As Shira mentioned, there was this initial round of talks last Friday in Oman. Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner on one side, Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi on the other side. Maybe they went well, maybe they didn't. Nobody quite knows, but at least they were talking, right? And this was last Friday. The sense is that there will be further rounds of talks. I mean, given what we've just talked about for now 15 minutes, Michael, let's start with you. Is there scope for a deal? As they say, can the minimum that Iran gives up meet the maximum that Donald Trump will demand of them, whatever he chooses to demand of them?
I think that depends on whether he's willing to take a skinny deal and present it as a nitzachon muchlat, a total victory. There's no world to me in which the Iranians are going to give up their enriched uranium and agree not to enrich another gram of it to any percentage and give up all their ballistic missiles and agree to stop funding proxies. I just don't think that's going to happen. So, and not for nothing, but folks who know Iran well keep on telling me that the Iranian messaging is that they won the 12-day exchange back in June because they got hit by the U.S. and Israel, and hey, they still have their enriched uranium, and they're still there, and the administration is now willing to talk to them. And last week they insulted Trump a bunch of times and sent a drone at a U.S. warship and harassed U.S. flagged oil tankers, and last second said, we're not coming to Istanbul, you have to come to Oman, which is symbolic because the previous nuclear negotiations under Obama were in Oman. And so, doing that basically is an attempt to draw a straight line from those negotiations to these ones and say, hey, we're only negotiating over the nuclear program. So they're operating in all sorts of ways where at least they're signaling that they're in good shape. And so far there haven't been consequences for those things.
So far,
I don't think they're going to give up all that stuff so far. And so I don't think they're going to give up all that stuff. So it goes back to something you raised earlier. Is Trump willing to go for a skinny deal or not? I think that if he's willing to go for a skinny deal, which will absolutely drive Netanyahu and the Israelis crazy, then there's a possibility. But I think that if he wants to go through all the issues and really limit what the Iranians are doing, then again, I am no expert on Iranian domestic politics, but from the way they're behaving and from folks who know Iran well, it doesn't seem like the Iranians are under so much stress, or at least they don't feel like they're under so much stress that they would give up everything like that.
There's always, right, a gap in sort of understanding Iran and viewing it as sort of transactional regime that just looks at like what are the costs now and I think downplaying the ideological nature and the choices that they make and the motivations. And I'm by no means Iranian expert, but I think there's an expectation they really have their backs against the wall right now, right? With the protests, with international pressure, no one has patience for them. All this, right? All the unprecedented military posture in the region. A U.S. president that has shown that he is not scared of using force, right? Like you have all that, and Israel that is not scared anymore. And still, we are not sure what choice they will make. And if they choose this time to say, okay, we have to, because summer is coming, and again, we're not going to have water, and right, it's going to be all these domestic issues, and we have to find a way out, and we need a pause, and we need some sort of an agreement to be flexible on these other issues. Or not. It's hard to believe that Iran would give up on everything or that it has to be done in a face-saving way, right? Which I don't know if Trump's negotiation team will do or not. But I do think there's fundamental, right? There's the gap between the U.S. in terms of like understanding Iran, but there's also a gap between what Israel. I really think Netanyahu doesn't want any deal. I think he wants to be the one signing sort of the death certificate of the Iranian regime. I mean, I think that's what he wants his legacy to be, and therefore an agreement that was like when we were looking for a better deal, right after JCPOA. I think at the moment this is not what he wants. Where it's going to go, how it's going to get, how this negotiation is going to go with the Iranians. Right? Who knows? And what's the window? Because maybe the Iranians feel like more emboldened now because they're saying, well, we got people off the hook. We have the countries in the region advocating on our behalf. We have Ramadan coming. We doubted the Saudis and the Emiratis and all these other flying things in the region for the next month, right? So we have time. I don't know if this is the calculation. I have no idea. We can be waking up to sirens here in the middle of the night, right? So we have to be careful.
Yeah.
But it's probably what the way we see that Trump prefers a deal. I'm sure the Iranians see that also.
So I'll touch on the just my own opinion about the Iranians and then the Americans side of this. Look, I think the Iranians, I think they understand their backs are against the wall. I think they understand their position is, more difficult than it was, but that they view the current moment as existential for them, and that any concession, especially on something like the missiles, would be near impossible for them to agree to. And this is, pretty much every credible Iran analyst worth their salt it will tell you that yes, there may be room and scope for a deal on the nuclear program, but that the missiles are really the major stumbling block. And in terms of the Americans, I mean, look, this is a very dangerous game, but Donald Trump gave an interview literally last night and said nuclear program, missiles, and this and that. So he said it, right? But then sometimes he says only the nuclear program. So again, it depends on whether his negotiators, Jared and Steve, will hold the line on nuclear and missiles. And I think, look, nuclear is possible. Nuclear plus all the other stuff, very, very difficult. And then we're getting into scenarios about, the use of military force. I'll just say that this isn't just, Netanyahu perhaps making this pitch to Trump, but maybe others saying, look, if it took the Israelis 12 days last June to do X amount of damage to Iran's nuclear program and missiles and whatnot, what can the U.S. military and the Israeli military, really the Air Force, and not only, do in 6 days to the nuclear program, the missiles, and whatever else they want to hit, right? And that, yes, he doesn't want drawn out conflict, and it's not going to be pretty all over the Middle East, but I don't know. The U.S. military and the Israeli military are fairly formidable, and maybe the pitch to Trump is, yes, there will be 6 difficult days of fighting, but on the other side of it, there won't be there definitely won't be a nuclear program. There will be very little left of their missile arsenal, and maybe it'll weaken the regime enough that they'll either teeter, maybe collapse, or they'll come to the table and negotiate with you, as he likes to say, reasonably and responsibly. Again, I'm not reporting this, but I could see that pitch being made to a president who doesn't like foreign entanglements. So I'll just leave it at that. Diplomacy, military option. I want to talk about the optics of it all. That the Israeli Prime Minister, Bibi, dashed off to DC very publicly to, very publicly stiffen the spines of the Americans. And that if there's no deal, and if Trump does pull the trigger like he just threatened to do, if there's no deal, isn't there a danger here that there'll be a lot of people in the U.S., and not just in the U.S., perceiving Israel to have dragged the U.S. into a Middle East war? Michael, is this not a danger, in terms of the optics of the Iran issue and the Iran crisis?
There's certainly a danger. I don't think, frankly, that Netanyahu cares about that, because the danger, I don't think that he views the danger as falling on him, right? The danger, largely, if that happens, falls on the pro-Israel community in the United States and on American Jews. So there's that. But wait, also,
Michael, hold on. Doesn't it also fall on Israel and Israel's kind of standing in the world, support for Israel? I mean, obviously they're not, we in Israel aren't going to be, we're not going to bear the brunt of it immediately, but it is.
Forget about Israel standing in the world, right? Israel is having a very difficult time in lots of places now anyway. I don't think that in Sweden this is going to be the thing that pushes it even more over the edge. But also, let's not forget that Trump has used plenty of hawkish rhetoric toward Iran on his own. Trump has already participated in a bombing campaign against Iran back in June. Now, yes, that was a bombing campaign that started as an Israeli campaign. But I guess the point is, from Netanyahu's perspective, he may not view this as that much of a danger. But of course, the danger exists. I mean, there's a whole chorus of people here on now both sides of the aisle who view Israel as pushing the U.S. into all sorts of things, and particularly on the Republican side, view the U.S. now as being enmeshed in the Middle East and fighting Israel's wars for it in ways that are not in the U.S. interest. And of course, on the Democratic side, there's a lot of skepticism about war in Iran, no matter what. Forget about who's pushing it. And of course, Israel has all sorts of problems with Democrats in terms of military activity and human rights. So, no, it's not going to be good. But I doubt that that's Netanyahu's top concern. I think that Netanyahu wants the U.S. to participate once again in a serious military action in Iran. That is his preference. And he's not going to be deterred by the fact that it may end up looking bad for Israel. He's certainly not going to be deterred by the fact that it may have real consequences for the Jewish community here in the United States. That's just not what he cares about.
Yeah, I mean, fair point that Donald Trump started this cycle vis-a-vis Iran in the beginning of January during the bloody domestic unrest in Iran. And I thought about this, well, when this visit by Bibi to DC was announced, an Israeli prime minister can want to go have a meeting with the U.S. president in Washington. The U.S. president has to agree to accept and receive the Israeli prime minister, right? So, Donald Trump is a big boy himself. Shira, what do you think of the optics of it all? Bibi, this kind of urgent, visit and trip to DC that he pushed up, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there are the voices in the U.S. that think that Israel is dragging the U.S. to wars in the Middle East, right? And this whole concept of Israel. And by the way, this is not only from people who are against Israel, right? But this whole concept of Israel's fighting by itself, for itself. After the last 2 years, it's eroded, and even Israel supporters, right, has been a U.S. Presence in the Middle East that is here largely. Some of it is U.S. interest, but a lot of it was other interests that are primarily the interest of the U.S.'s number one ally in the region, and we all benefited from this, right? I don't know if Netanyahu cares about the optics or not. We just chatted about it briefly. He was supposed to be accompanied on the trip with a very senior Air Force officer, Tischler, Brigadier General Tischler, who is one-star general, and he didn't show up. And this could be the reason that he didn't join the trip, is because of the optics of this. That this is too much, bringing a military person to the meeting where they can basically convincing Trump that the Israeli Air Force can't do this if you just let them. But I don't know. But certainly this optics is the optics is there, and will stay as, and we'll see what happens. Right? It's not just Iran. Iran is sort of the big show, but there's also Gaza, and basically Trump making himself the head of the custodianship of Gaza, and. Right, there are other things in the region. I think that's really interesting in the perspective that we kind of like policy wonks can go in and look at the national security strategy and then national defense strategy, and we look at like the Middle East sections, and they're like this short, and they're all like we brought peace to the Middle East, and there's really no alignment between what's like on print and what actually the administration is doing in the Middle East. Clearly, more than they want to do, at least on paper. I will just say another thing that, there's the sense of like Netanyahu he knows how to turn Trump's mind, and I don't know this whole concept of like Trump being beholden to Netanyahu. We're in a different world now, right? It's not even first term. It's not even that Trump controls the Republican Party so well. What's going to happen if there's going to be a deal that Israel doesn't want? Bibi's going to be very limited in his tools. He obviously not going to go to Congress, but it's not like you can go and talk to Lindsey Graham and convince him. Lindsey Graham has been saying what he thinks online all the time. So Israel will have to accept whatever Trump decides here, I think, and we can just wait and see.
Is there anyone who still thinks that Trump is beholden to Netanyahu? Is that
Not that he's
is that
beholden to
still a thing?
Netanyahu, but I think, you always have like, oh, Bibi's going to come to Washington and Trump is going to tell him, why did you do that? Or why did you do that? And then somehow comes out of the meeting and Bibi gets a safety net, right? There was like the first visit was helping them pass the budget effectively and stuff. So there is a sense that I'm sure it's not it's not based on nothing, right? That Netanyahu has a convincing power that is effective in the room, right? That I think is what people assume.
I mean, he's gotten safety nets, but he's also been saddled with lots of things that he did not want.
He's eaten 2 ceasefires that he didn't want, and whatever, and
two ceasefires, a board of peace with people on it. He doesn't like, a Rafah crossing that is now open, and stamping people with the PA stamp. I mean, he's gotten lots of things he doesn't.
Yeah, I think people.
No, but they changed it. He changed it. The stamp is now the national. Welcome to the National Committee of the Government of Gaza, and now they're changing the logo, and of course it symbols. Don't get me wrong, but also, right. What does Bibi want? It's like we're just like kicking the can down the road. We're just dragging time. He got him hostages back, and the first part of a deal that the fact that Trump said we're into. I know, Neri, you're guiding this. We're not in Gaza yet, but this idea of like going into all those problematic parts from Bibi's perspective are in phase 2. But effectively, nothing changed on the ground to indicate that we're phase 2. So for Bibi's base. And also for the rest of the Israelis, okay, he said phase 2, but what has changed? There is nothing. Even those technocrats are not in Gaza. So I agree with you. He's forced to get it, but he can say it's never going to happen. So
that, by the way, to me is going to be another key to figuring out how this meeting went. If the NCAG all of a sudden shows up in Gaza the next week or two, my guess is that will be a byproduct of today's meeting too. But we'll see.
Israel Policy Forum is a policy organization rooted in the Jewish community. Our mission is to build support for a secure, Jewish, democratic Israel through a viable resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, advancing pragmatic U.S. policy towards the conflict, U.S.-Israel relations, and regional diplomacy among policymakers and community leaders. We promote policy measures endorsed by credible security experts, develop analysis and commentary, and convene programs that engage and educate leaders across the political, denominational, and generational spectrums. Our Young Professionals Initiative, IPF at Teen, works to elevate the discourse among next-generation leaders by building community and facilitating engaging programs related to Israeli-Palestinian affairs. To learn more about our work, visit us online at israelpolicyforum.org and follow us on social media. If you rely on Israel Policy Forum for credible and nuanced analysis, please make a tax-deductible gift today at ipf.li/supportthepod or at the Support the Show link in the show notes.
I love how Shira acknowledged my powers as the host and then just completely blew through that stoplight. The NCAG, by the way, for our listeners and viewers, the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza, the Palestinian Technocratic Committee that was set up as part of this phase 2 of the ceasefire, which I would have introduced to our listeners and viewers if given a chance, but I'll do that now. So basically, let's move on to Gaza. Which was the other big issue on the agenda just now in Washington. Obviously, phase 2 of the Trump ceasefire has begun in earnest. This new Palestinian Technocratic Committee was formed, Board of Peace, the various executive boards of the Board of Peace. The Rafah crossing, which connects Gaza to Egypt, was opened, I guess, somewhat last week. We even had the first country, Indonesia, to announce that it would be willing to send troops to the international peacekeeping force that was going to be part of the ceasefire in Gaza. So just based on your prior comments, Shira, you don't think anything has really changed fundamentally on the ground over the past, say, week or two as phase 2 has kind of begun and been launched? Is that a fair assessment?
I mean, it's not assessment; it's a fact.
Okay. Okay.
Nothing on the ground has changed. Effectively, the IDF has not withdrawn. In fact, the yellow line is being moved further
westward.
west.
Yeah, the yellow line. The yellow line
instead of-
is the line that divides Gaza in half as part of the ceasefire. IDF controls half of Gaza. Hamas still controls the other half, less than half.
Humanitarian aid goes at the same levels that it did before with the same relatively restrictions. I guess Israel approved school supplies. It's basically markers and sheets of paper. It's not like curriculum and school books. What else? You don't have the ISF. I mentioned that the NCAG, the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza, a group of really excellent professional people that are supposed to be the alternative to Hamas. They're still in Cairo. There's a variety of reasons, and I'd be, Michael, it'd be great if they actually go in next week, because this will indicate that something is changing on the ground, but they're still in Gaza. And so effectively at the moment, nothing has changed. It doesn't mean that it cannot change. I think the first marker of change will be having them in Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
Having them alive, right? That nothing actually happens to them. I'm sorry, the bar is pretty low.
Right.
But then them actually able to provide some services. Hamas said that they would be willing to pass on the civilian management of Gaza to NCAG. So something like that is going to happen. And then when you have some sort of international stabilization security force taking over an area where the IDF is, we can see changes on the ground that would mean that phase 2 is here. I think at the moment, we're not seeing that. What we are seeing, I should say, it's not that we haven't seen, it's not that nothing changed. Things have changed tiny bit, but to the worse, because you have Hamas cementing its control even more. Right, in the past 2 weeks, we're not seeing reduced Hamas control. We're seeing actually Hamas being reasserting its role as the de facto sovereign. We're seeing ad hoc recovery efforts by Hamas that gives them legitimacy. We're seeing more. There's a fixing. I don't know with what, but very ingenuous. But we're seeing roads being fixed in some parts of Gaza.
Really?
We are seeing some smallholder sort of farming, like community gardens. We're seeing Hamas posted the final exams of the medical school in the University of Azar. We're seeing some school children. It's like very big attempt to show Hamas to show that they are there and they're governing. Of course, they would do what it means, what they need to do when the NCAG comes in, but the fact is that we are still seeing Hamas. The ceasefire continues, but the fire does not cease for a day, even,
Mm-hmm.
or for an hour.
But Shira, let me ask.
So that's where we are.
Let me ask you this before I turn to Michael. You follow this very closely, closer than most. We have to admit, is the fact that not enough progress has been made. Surely either the Palestinian Technocratic Committee or the High Representative for Gaza, Nikolai Mladenov, who oversees the NCAG, or the executive board that has Kushner and Witkoff on it, or all these other various committees and bodies that are supposed to kind of shepherd the phase 2. Surely they see it as well. Surely they understand, because they said it publicly, that they have to show quick wins to the Gazan people, right? As this kind of moves ahead, to build credibility, to build legitimacy for this new governing structure for Gaza. So if this is all happening, or not happening, rather, on the ground, aren't they seeing that?
They are, and really it's not, I don't want to cast a blaming finger at anyone, right? They've created the structures that are not, they're two boards and different things, but the basic principle of the transitional administration connected to the PA with international support and stuff. We wrote this, and I don't know, it was the first time on October 12, 2023. I think they got these parts right, Michael. I have the briefing still from that. They got these parts fine. It's a very, very, very complex jobs, and it takes time. And I think the expectation was not calibrated. It's like, oh, we have peace in the Middle East. Wait, it takes time. This NCAG, they have to come in. They have to be able to deliver, because if they come in and they can deliver, then what have we done? What can they realistically deliver when Hamas is still there and Israeli policy doesn't change? It needs to be on the humanitarian front. What are the issues? It's very, very complex. They have to be secure. They could be sitting in what we call the green zone. It's very complicated, but the green zone is sort of the Israeli zone. But then they would look like an Israeli puppet and don't have the legitimacy of the people. We know that Hamas has threatened. One of the technocrats, like the security guy, they threatened him and said he's a red line. So do they go in, but without him? He's supposed to head the security, the new police that will be trained. There are a lot of pieces, and I think the frustration for many of us who have been following this, that I do hope that this will happen. It will happen quickly in a way that they show that there's an alternative to Hamas.
Right.
The frustration is that we all knew it's going to be a local police, right? Why? At least selection, vetting, training hasn't started.
Why wait two plus years? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the stuff that it's more like this. The original sin was like refusing to discuss this day after setting, right? That's the original sin, because as you take down Hamas, and we see the limits of power here, you always had to build something, and we refused to build this. Israel, right? There was like the clans and militias. We see how this is going, which, by the way, creates a more complicated situation at the moment. So anyway, I think there are objective reasons why this has not happened at the moment. I do hope that this will be fast tracked. There's a meeting with the Board of Peace next week. They will raise some money. There's going to be a location. Hopefully they're able to show something. Hopefully, here, I'll just end with this. I do think the advantage is that, on the one hand, those technocrats, really, God bless them, that they took this job, the hardest job in the world. I don't think there's a player that genuinely wants them to succeed very much. I don't think the PA wants this, because they see them as a competition. The Palestinian Authority, they see this as competition. Hamas obviously doesn't want them to succeed. They want to succeed just a little bit. Israel, this government doesn't want them to succeed, because then what it means in the end is dialogue, Palestinian, right? The big questions. But none of the players wants to be blamed for failure. And this is very, very important. I don't think it's enough. I think for them to succeed, you really want all the other players to understand that their success is, the NCAG success is their success. We're not there now. This will take some uplifting. But the fact that they can't actively sabotage it is positive in my view.
Okay, it's a small comfort, but comfort of a sort nonetheless. Michael.
No, but they're great people and professional.
No, look, I'm not being cynical or sarcastic. The one thing they have going for them, as we found out an hour ago in Trump's Truth Social post, is that he wants this U.S. president wants it to succeed. He said there is peace in the Middle East, so God help anybody who, disabuses him of that notion. Michael, sorry for the delay in getting back to you. What do you make of the phase 2 now, a few weeks in? Optimistic, pessimistic, withholding judgment? And like Shira said, what are you looking for in terms of next steps?
So I'm withholding judgment, but that last point you just mentioned, Neri, is the key. I'm not arguing that there's been huge progress on the ground in Gaza. There obviously has not. And yeah, like the NCAG is still stuck in Cairo, and until the Israelis agree to let them in, they're not getting in. But I think the point is that, as I've argued, Trump has made Bibi do a bunch of things that he hasn't wanted to do, and to kind of sit on his hands and watch a bunch of things happen that he didn't want to happen. And in this case, you have, even if it hasn't translated yet into real progress on the ground, you have all this architecture that Trump proposed in his 20-point plan, and we now see it starting to get put into place, right? I mean, there were people out there arguing that the NCAG was literally never going to be formed because Israel was vetoing all the members. There were people out there who argued that the Rafah crossing was literally never going to open until Hamas was fully disarmed. And now, lo and behold, the Rafah crossing is open. Jared Kushner went to Davos and presented his slideshow, which lots of people made fun of, and certainly it seems very unrealistic. But he's overseeing this process, and the timeline he put for for his reconstruction and for there to be 100% employment in Gaza was 3 years. Okay,
Right.
now we can sit here and say, of course, that's not going to happen. But I think the point is that the administration is putting all of these things into place to try to get success, and they clearly have an expectation that people are going to comply, right? And we'll see who shows up for the Board of Peace meeting next week in DC, but it certainly is happening. And yeah, Trump today, after his meeting with Bibi, where I'm sure Bibi went in and said, "Hey, this was a great plan, great idea, but none of it's working." Trump still goes out there and tweets, for lack of a better verb, tweets, "Hey, there's great progress in Gaza and peace in the Middle East." So yeah, the situation on the ground is not a whole lot different than it was, but these things are being put into place, and Trump is going to keep on pushing and keep on insisting. And frankly, we've seen him literally create his own reality. That's how we have a ceasefire, right? Where he put out the 20-point plan, and Netanyahu said, "Oh yeah, sure, I accept." And they went around telling everybody that it's not going to matter because Hamas will say no. And then Hamas, kind of said yes, kind of said no, and Trump said, "Oh, great, Hamas
Right.
says yes. We have a ceasefire," and like shoved it down everybody's throats. Not least of all Bibi Netanyahu. So I'm not judging anything by what things look like on the ground now, and I'm certainly not arguing that 1 year from now or 3 years from now this is all going to be solved, and Gaza is going to be Jared Kushner's venture capital utopia. But I'm not willing to discount the fact that Trump has a lot of sway and he doesn't brook dissent very well, and he has made Netanyahu swallow a whole bunch of things, and I think that's going to continue.
If I didn't know any better, that
Yeah,
sounded
if
a
I
bit
can
a bit
add,
optimistic, Michael.
yeah. No, but Michael is
Hey,
right. I also
don't
think
accuse me. Don't accuse me of optimism, Neri. That's fighting words.
You have to stay on brand.
But it is correct, right? The fact is that we never thought, right, that Hamas will return all hostages, and right, big things have happened here that we didn't think would happen. So I have no doubt that we will see progress, right? I'm just saying, like in the last, we haven't seen the progress since he announced phase 2, but I have no doubt that we will see the progress. I think the progress is going to be bumpy, and while there are all these presentations of having a data center in the middle of Gaza and skyscrapers, there are a lot of objective problems that maybe there's going to be a gap between this vision and what's happening on the ground. But there is hope for change, and I'm like Michael. I'm convinced the U.S. administration is deeply involved in this. Right, it's the signature foreign policy legacy. It's a big thing. No one's going to mess this party up. And also, if reports are correct, right, the New York Times just reported as a plan for starting with decommissioning of heavy arms. I don't know who in Hamas agreed to this and how is Hamas decision making at the moment is made, but I'm actually convinced that Hamas would entertain an entry point into some sort of decommissioning, beginning the process, because right, they can do this to take a break. And this is also a big deal if they're able to get Hamas to agree against its agree temporarily to stop the armed resistance as a rationale, and we're far away from there at the moment. But things are happening that are in the positive direction.
Yeah.
I agree on that on the Hamas point. I'll also take this opportunity to say that IPF's report on Hamas disarmament is coming out later today.
It is.
So people
should definitely
check it out.
Very, very important issue that will arguably make or break this entire post-war Gaza situation. But we'll leave that for a different time and a different episode. Before we wrap up, we have to talk about the West Bank, which once again, as has been the case now for 2+ years, gets short thrift given everything else going on, Gaza and Iran. But earlier this week, the Israeli cabinet decided on a slew of unprecedented steps that, taken together, I think it's fair to say, amounts to even more de facto annexation by Israel of the West Bank. Steps like making it easier for Israeli Jews to directly buy West Bank land, expanding Israeli civilian oversight into even Palestinian-controlled areas, Area A and Area B of the West Bank, and a lot more. We don't have time to get into it all, but IPF came out with a rightfully very strong statement against all this, saying, taken together, these steps treat the West Bank as sovereign Israeli territory rather than territory subject to temporary military occupation or politically disputed territory, which I think was the entire point of this Israeli cabinet's decision. Michael, explain this to us in lay terms. How bad is it for everyone seeking to avoid a one-state reality here between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea?
It's pretty bad. This government has done all sorts of ways to expand Israel's presence inside of the West Bank. And we've discussed many of these over the last 3 years. Everything from the retroactive legalization of illegal outposts to the explosion of illegal farms, to just approving quote unquote legal settlements, legal under Israeli law, at record pace. But what they're trying to do with this is really just bring everything more under civilian control and make what happens in the West Bank look more like what happens inside of Israel proper. It's to erase any distinction so that at some point, even talking about military occupation or military structures will strike people as ridiculous because things won't be any different in the West Bank than they are inside of Israel. So that's one. What actually has me even more concerned is the part about now claiming enforcement powers over Palestinian construction in areas A and B, because that's new, right? The IDF operates under Oslo. The IDF can operate in Area B, but it operates in Area A all the time, right? Constantly, literally a permanent presence now in what used to be the Jenin refugee camp. This is different. This is saying that Israel now has the power to demolish any Palestinian structures it wants anywhere in areas A and B, places that under Oslo, Israel has no authority over in terms of construction and administrative issues. And Israel can do this on these vague guidelines, right? If anything threatens historical sites, if anything threatens archaeological sites, if anything
environmental issues
poses an environmental issues, which by the way, Regavim, the NGO founded by Bezalel Smotrich, which is one of the most hardline NGOs, was founded on this basis. The idea is that Regavim is concerned about the environment, and so it's constantly lobbying to demolish Palestinian homes and structures in Area C on environmental grounds. So, this is literally the playbook that they've used in Area C, and they're now taking it to areas A and B. And we all know what's coming. I mean, the same way that construction for Palestinians in Area C is quite literally impossible. We're going to see Israel start to play all sorts of shenanigans in areas A and B as well. So, to me, that's the bigger issue here. And we had this strange episode a few weeks ago where folks in the Israeli government and folks here in the U.S. were arguing in response to Trump saying repeatedly that Israel can't annex the West Bank, something, by the way, that he said again yesterday, that there's a distinction between the West Bank and Yehuda v'Shomron, Judea and Samaria, right? And the distinction that people posited was Judea and Samaria is Area C, or settlements where you have Israelis, and the West Bank is areas A and B. And so anything that Israel does in Judea and Samaria, that's fine, right? That's sovereign Israeli territory, even though it's not, but that
and
was
even
the
though
claim.
You have Palestinians living in it, and it's 60% of the West Bank.
Correct. But that was the claim, right? Treat Area C as one thing and treat areas A and B as something else. So when Trump warns about the West Bank, what he's saying is don't do anything in areas A and B. And now 3 days before Netanyahu comes to D.C., the Israeli Security Cabinet literally votes to make that fictitious distinction even hollower than it was before. And so who knows if this came up in their meeting today, but I really hope, given that the White House was asked for comment about this on Monday, and they issued a comment in the name of an unnamed official, and then Trump was asked about it directly by Barak Ravid, I think, yesterday on Tuesday, and Trump responded directly and said, "No West Bank annexation. I don't want to have to think about the West Bank right now. We've got enough going on." I hope that somebody put this enough on Trump's radar that he asked Netanyahu about it.
Yeah, just by the way, for our listeners and viewers, Area A, Area B, Area C, it's coming out of the Oslo Accords of the 1990s. It divided up the West Bank. So Area A is basically the major Palestinian population centers under, Palestinian civilian control and ostensibly security control. Area B is kind of the outlying villages under Palestinian civilian control and Israeli still security control. And then Area C, as we mentioned, is like 60% of the West Bank, and that's where the settlements are in full Israeli and the military and civilian control. Shira, you have an article coming out soon, I believe, in Foreign Affairs magazine about the West Bank in particular and the real damage wrought by this Netanyahu government over the past 3+ years in all aspects relating to the West Bank, especially in recent days. Give us a sneak peek. How do you see things in the West Bank, especially after the last 3.5 years of this Israeli government?
So, yeah, thank you. I mean, I agree with Michael, everything he said. I actually, Foreign Affairs asked for a piece about the West Bank, the West Bank about a month ago, and it just took time for me sort of to write it. And then all of a sudden it became an issue that people do talk about it a little bit, although a week ago, no one spoke about it at all. So it's a good hook. I agree with everything Michael said. I thought IPF's statement was very good, and I think it's no coincidence that my analysis is very similar. I guess this is clearly a departure from the usual stuff that we've seen, right? It also amounts to not just the de facto annexation we've been seeing, but also de jure, according to some legal structures. But this is just the latest development in what we've been seeing, that basically this Israeli government, and I think this is the policy, right, is under the fog of war, is completely implementing Smotrich's manifesto from 2017, right? The decisive plan, basically his vision, and he said it, and I give him utmost respect for at least saying what he wants. He said, Palestinians here can live here as second-class residents, not even citizens, and if not, they're welcome to leave.
Right.
And he's just turning this manifesto into a vision. I've said it before. I think he's number one strategist in Israel. He has a vision. He articulates it. He's very good at the bureaucracy. And so the changes that he's been doing, in addition to this, which, by the way, again, the cabinet decided on it. Was there a vote? No vote? What's the process? No one knows. And this is a big, right? It's not even like signing the Board of Peace. I mean, I think it's more fundamental that this is a violation of bilateral agreements that Israel is committed to.
It's a violation of Oslo. It's a violation of Oslo. It's a violation of the Hebron Accord. These are real agreements that Israel signed as a country.
Right, and no one knows how these things were decided on. But putting this aside and their implications on this strategic thing, I mean, what has been happening is not just the territorial sort of engineering that we're seeing in the West Bank, and it's very creative, right? Not just with the settlements, construction, with those farms that are now, instead of counting settlers, they're counting what they call dunams, like territory kilometers,
acres,
that they take over, with measures to weaken the PA and the Palestinian Authority, bring it to collapse, with withholding funds from it. Some legally funds, right, the martyr payments, but other funds that actually Israel doesn't have the authority to withhold PA salaries to their employees in Gaza. There's some also funds that the Palestinians are claiming that Israel is withholding from the Allenby crossing with Jordan, we haven't even spoken about the settler violence, right, which has become a daily affair
every day
in the West Bank, threatening the lives of Palestinians. And I will say it's remarkable, for the first time in I think ever, according to Israeli security sources, the month of January had more Jewish terrorist attacks against Palestinians than Palestinian terrorist attacks against Jews, which is just telling. And of course, there's the severity of the act themselves, but the impunity with which they're treated, which is more concerning. So what we're seeing is a basket case of a West Bank that is really teetering on the brink, and how long it can survive. And I think I'll just end with that. It's going to be could undermine President Trump's vision for Gaza, because I think it was like point 9 and point 19 do speak about the Palestinian Authority returning to Gaza after reforms, but at this rate there will be nothing to reform, and we will have a much many more security assignments and burden on the Israeli taxpayers for dealing with this West Bank mess.
Yep. And it's a huge, huge mess on all the issues that you rightfully laid out, Shira. I do hope that either people in Washington or maybe people in the Middle East, maybe in certain Arab capitals, do bring this to the U.S. president's attention and explain to him that the Israeli prime minister and the Israeli government are making him look like a fool. Because he said very clearly there will be no annexation. He very clearly has a broader plan for not just Gaza, but the wider Middle East. Like he said, there's peace in the Middle East. And this is, undermining him directly. So ideally, they explain that to him, and maybe, maybe Trump will focus his eye on the West Bank, and maybe halt a lot of this, negative, very, very negative things that Israel is doing on the West Bank. With that, we have to leave it there. We've covered a lot of ground. We've resolved all the issues, I'm happy to say. So there won't be anything to talk about. Hopefully,
peace in the Middle East.
Exactly.
There's peace in the Middle East. If you write it in all caps, then it has to be true. That's the fundamental lesson. But great to see.
That's what Herzl said, right?
Correct.
Inshallah.
Correct. Great to see you both in this new year, and we won't make it another 2 months till you come back on. Be well. Okay, thanks again to Michael Koplow and Shira Efron as always. Also special thanks to our producer, Jacob Gilman, our editor, Tracy Levy, and our assistant producer, Eden Jesselson, as always. And to all of you who support Israel Policy Forum's work. Do consider making a donation to Israel Policy Forum so it can keep being a credible source of analysis and ideas on issues such as these that we all care deeply about, including this podcast. And most importantly, thank you for listening, and please subscribe and spread the word.